Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Maine Take. As usual, I am very pleased to be your host and to have the opportunity to bring to you twice a month when the legislature is not in session and when they are, every single week. And every program, we take a look at some of the issues, ideas, alternatives that are being considered to help improve the lives of Maine people as well as their livelihood. And today we are focusing on an economic initiative that's at work in our state. It's been present for close to 7 years since its creation, and one that shows remarkable progress in a very short period of time and offers very much hope and promise for the future. It's brought to us by the private sector. It has a vision and a plan to place our state in a globally competitive position by working on the strengths of what we have to offer and looking at market opportunities that exist for our state. That initiative, interestingly enough, is called FocusMaine. And with me today is the current president and CEO who's stepping down at the end of this month, July 1 to be exact, and pursuing other alternatives. But in the meantime, to begin the program, we're going to be speaking with her about the story behind FocusMaine, the structure that it has, as well as the success. That person is Kim Hamilton. I have great pleasure and it's considerable pride that she's with us today. She's had a remarkable 5 years and skillfully launching FocusMaine, and it's a delight to have her and to share this time with her. So Kim, welcome aboard. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I want to go back. There's a lot to talk about considering the initiative itself, but I really want to begin with that first time that I met you. You may not even remember it, but I certainly do. It was FocusMaine had come together, the two leaders, Mike Dubiak and Andrea Chinquette Maker, had this idea, and they brought together a number of people to explore the idea. And at some point we had retained, in those first couple of years as we were coming together, we'd retained a global consulting firm, McKinsey. And they identified 3 signature areas that met that global trend that spoke to our strengths. And we were in a position to hire the president and CEO, namely yourself. But at that time, we were interviewing 2 people. And it got to the point where Bob Moore of Dead River and myself, representing the State Chamber of Commerce, were asked to interview the 2 finalists, you being one of them. You were the second one we interviewed. The first one did a marvelous job, but as well as you did, needless to say, because you are the person we selected. Do you remember that time, that moment, that interview?
Oh, I remember it clearly, Dana. I came in ready to give a presentation. I had a PowerPoint document and wanted to walk you through my thoughts. And you and Bob wanted to have a conversation. And it was just a great way to get to know just the thinking behind FocusMaine and all of the work actually that the entire leadership team at that time had done.
Yeah, like I said, both candidates were strong, but and I want to explore this a bit because I want people to know you for the success that you've enjoyed. And if I do a good job, they will come to know that by virtue of this interview, or at least have a glimpse into that. But your education, your experience really spoke out that particular day at the interview, which we found to be fulfilling as your experience as a president has had. But the other thing that really caught the eye of both Bob and I was the obvious skill that you had, but the personality was extremely special. You had a very sincere approach, a very comfortable way, and boy, that has proven to be extremely valuable in the way that FocusMaine has developed in these past 5 years. So I give you tremendous credit. We were fortunate that we were witness to that at that particular day, but it would be hard not to be witness because it was so obvious. But it's
Well,
been
that's very
key to
kind.
success. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it's proven to be so valuable during these 5 years as we've seen FocusMaine progress. I want our people also to know that watching this show that Kim is a product of Yarmouth, Maine. I think if I was being more specific, it would be North Yarmouth, Maine,
North
and
Yarmouth.
how important that is. But Yarmouth was not where, or Maine was not where she pursued her education. As a matter of fact, she went to the, as I recall, University of Oregon, where she was one of the very few that would be selected for the Robert Clark Honors Program, liberal arts, where only 17% of those who apply get accepted. Remarkable. Didn't end there. The master's program, which was at Johns Hopkins, which we know to be in Maryland, so it was a big jump from Oregon to Maryland, in which you pursued, wasn't it international studies? And then from there, you went to Brown University in Rhode Island, where your Ph.D., which now Dr. Kimberly Hamilton, is where you got your sociology PhD with a focus in demography, as I recall.
Right.
That is an incredible foundation upon which to build. Use that for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation work, as well as Feeding America. So when you came to us with a strong statement of leadership, management, and the ability that I spoke of a moment ago, which was that personality that was really so evident. So you came to us, we selected you, it was a unanimous selection by the board, and we were off. What did you see in that early stage of looking at FocusMaine that you found to be unique and very promising?
Well, you've touched on it a little bit, Dana. I'm a generalist. So if you look at my background, French major, African studies, demography, I've covered a lot of different issues. And one of the great things about this particular role is when you think about economic development, all of those issues come together, right? So you think about population, you think about diversity, you think about economic opportunity. And so that was one of it's the really wonderful things for me is I'd been wanting to come back to Maine for quite a long time. My dad is here and I have deep family connections here and was just waiting for the right opportunity. And when I found out about FocusMaine, they were looking for someone who knew how to build partnerships, but also understood economic development and, had a sense of the state of Maine, but could also bring ideas from other places. So it just felt like a really unique way to apply the skills that I had to a place that I love.
Yeah, and you certainly have. When you, I can't imagine that there aren't many people that do not know about FocusMaine. But as you develop some of the relationships and partnerships that have been so key and so critical to its success, and you're talking to an audience that may not be as familiar with FocusMaine, how do you explain their story? What do you say about them? What is their mission, their purpose?
So what I would say is FocusMaine came out of a pretty simple question, which is where are the good jobs of the future going to come from in this state? And so that, led to the process that you already alluded to, which was to really kind of kick the tires on different sectors that could supercharge Maine's economy and look at, both what does Maine bring to the table, what are our assets, but also where's global consumer demand going, where's the global economy going? So when you look at kind of that convergence of Maine's assets and global trends, we ended up with these three sectors: agriculture, aquaculture, and biopharmaceuticals. And also knew that in order for those sectors to be successful, we also need to pay a lot of attention to the talent that was going to drive those and also the Maine economy. So we think about kind of the skills and talent area as an enabler for our sector-specific work. And I think one of the differentiators for FocusMaine is that we're interested in the multiplier effect that jobs created in Maine that sell their goods and services outside of the state can have here. So we know kind of on average, jobs that are created in those kinds of industries that sell outside of the state create another 1.6-ish jobs in the local economy. So it was, that's where we thought that power could come from by growing these sectors.
Yeah, and when you consider economic development, not to oversimplify it, but having been in it and around it for a number of years, it's remarkable how different entities will get into this economic development pursuit and not look at their own strengths or evaluate their own opportunities based on those strengths, and yet try to replicate what's done in another state, which may not be even close to what they're able to do, or really have the strength to pull it off because of their own characteristics. And FocusMaine didn't fall victim to that. They actually did exactly what you said. McKinsey looked about and established a value proposition where we can add those quality jobs and make a difference. And interestingly enough, it was really right here. It's fishing, farming, forestry. It's a pharma, bioscience, if you will. It's remarkable how the opportunity was right in our backyard, but done maybe a little differently. That's reassuring in so many ways.
Yeah, I think if you think about those traditional sort of fishing, farming, heritage industries, they probably wouldn't be your first port of call, right? In thinking about, the future growth opportunities. But, as we've come to understand, folks all around the country are looking for high quality, good food grown well that they can trace, and Maine has that in spades. So it was really about how do we take, the food and the entrepreneurship and all the good stuff that was happening in Maine, but introduce it, right, to a national audience. So much of our success has been built on kind of growing that Maine brand, selling more of those Maine good products outside of the state, and really introducing Maine to the rest of the country.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit about, you did a report in 21 that talked about the journey and the success. Can you share with us some of the highlights? Because I think it really speaks to the remarkable success that has taken place with FocusMaine in a very short period of time, to be honest.
Yeah, so we came through the pandemic as much as we're through it now, Dana. And when we looked at our different sectors, the pandemic had a different kind of impact on each of them. For the food sector, we saw that, the rise of shorter supply chains, looking at how do we really grow food security regionally, so thinking about how do we situate Maine in that context. With aquaculture, it was tougher, right? A lot of those aquaculture companies are selling to restaurants. They took a harder hit. And then with the biopharmaceuticals, it became really clear that Maine had a lot to offer. You might remember, Abbott and Puritan and some of those other companies doing so much to help the world, and in doing so, I think they put Maine on the map. So the impact was different. And then fast forward about a year, we stepped back to say, well, how have we done? And I'd say the success is sort of on two axes. One is in terms of the resources we've brought into the state. So through the Maine initiative, we've helped bring in another $2 million. Through an EDA Regional BioConnects effort, another $500,000 that we hope will become another $100 million as of September, working with the Rue Institute in Northeastern. But just directly on our own, we've created over 800 direct and indirect jobs, and we're just getting started. So I think we'll see much more after we see the pandemic a little bit more in the rearview mirror. We've helped over 150 companies. We've invested about 8.6 million in Maine's food economy. So really looking at a combination of attracting investments and also putting some well-placed bets with different partners that can help accelerate growth in those sectors, I think has been part of the magic, if you will, that got us to this place.
Yeah, it certainly has, and it's really paid off in so many different ways. But there's also something that I really would love to have our viewers be aware of, and that is the unique way that the service, the success has taken place. It's a group of people, the business and thought leaders have come together. They've hired incredible staff. They have a great president. But it's not your typical organization. You're not providing the service directly. Yes, you're raising funds, and yes, you've created partnerships, but it is those partners that are already in the business in different of those signature industries that you mentioned that deliver the service. And so it's a unique partnership, one you don't see often, but I commend you for the ability to do that. That requires incredible trust and relationship building. So talk a bit about that. That expands upon what I said.
Yeah, some of this I think was just the prescience of the leadership team that Maine didn't need another big nonprofit organization replicating what was already happening. But perhaps we could play a role in knitting together some of the efforts that were out there so we could do more together. And I think that's what's happened. So we decided not to build up a big staff, but to really look at, could we seed capacity in other organizations around the state that shared the vision that we had around, growing good jobs in the state of Maine in these sectors. And I think to date, we've worked with about 8 different organizations, and we've got MOUs with other organizations. And it's in that kind of co-creating of joint strategy and thinking about, how we can, bring our resources, our thoughts, their resources, their ideas together towards a common vision, I think has made a really big difference. Just as give you a couple of examples, with Educate Maine, we've launched the Maine Career Catalyst. Over 2,400 students have benefited from that. It's an internship program working with 90 different companies. It's been fantastic. We just launched an Aquaculture Pioneers internship program building on that success. And then with CEI, Coastal Enterprises, and the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, we've launched 3 food accelerator programs that didn't exist in the state of Maine. And we've just seen, tremendous growth in those. And we're now seeing those early companies that went through those programs, talking about how important that early mentoring and training had been for them.
Yeah, it's a remarkable story that speaks in terms of how we'd like to see things occur. It is true what you say that it seems like every new initiative creates, not intentionally, but in fact, a competitive situation when you do have already, in most instances, industry associations that are performing a function that we can work with to build, and you've done that masterfully. And I don't know of many other examples, so hats off to you. This would be something I'd love to continue with you, but I do want to ask you this. What's next for Kimberly Hamilton?
Yeah, so I am looking at how do I take the expertise that I have, Dana, both from FocusMaine, Feeding America, the Gates Foundation, and looking at how can I help other companies and organizations get from kind of early concept ideas and helping to launch those. So I'll be doing some consulting work over the next period of time and looking for the next right opportunity. I'm interested in working in Maine, but also globally.
Oh, I'm sure that your door will be knocked on many occasions because you have done such a marvelous job with FocusMaine. I think all of us that have been associated with a new initiative know how significant that beginning is, that You need a solid foundation. You need to start off strong. And boy, you've done that so well. I can't imagine. It is a combination. I repeat this because I believe it sincerely. It's a combination of education, experience, skill, but also personality or value of relationships, because you've displayed all of those traits, those valuable traits in your 5 years here. And I hope you'll forever be a resident and a contributor to Maine. You have so much to bring. You were and are the perfect person at the perfect time for this initiative to be where we are today and to set it up for the future. So I know they're simple words, but I say with sincerity, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dana. And I would just say that this kind of work is a team sport. And as I shared with one of our leadership team members, I feel like I got to play with a varsity team, and you are a part of that. So, thank you for your contributions to FocusMaine as well. The Maine State Chamber has been kind of one of our earliest partners, right there from the very beginning. So we really owe you guys a debt of gratitude for helping to make this happen.
Oh, trust me, it was our pleasure, and it's an honor to be associated with FocusMaine and all the good that it's doing and all the promise it holds for our future. And speaking of that, we are going to be interviewing the new president, CEO of FocusMaine. His name is Dana O'Brien. I will not forget his first name, although I may the second, but I don't think so. Anyway, we'll be interviewing him momentarily and finding out more about the person and what brought him to Maine and what some of his ideas may be. So thank you, Kim. Look forward.
Thank you, Dana.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It is now my pleasure to welcome the second president of FocusMaine. Came on the job on June 13th, not so long ago. And that, of course, is Dana O'Brien, who I mentioned as we finished up Kim's interview. Dana, it's a pleasure to have you with us today on such short notice, but you are in an extremely important position that brings incredible credentials. So I'm grateful that you took the time and pleased that you're with us today.
Well, I am pleased to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh no, let me be very clear. This will not be your toughest interview in the world that you will have in the future years, but I do want to take the occasion because I think it's very important that we spend some time introducing you to our viewers to get them to know a bit about yourself, your background, your experience. What inspired you? What was that journey that brought you to FocusMaine, and why that fits, why that experience, those credentials that people are gonna see and hear about, why that fits so perfectly into what comes next for FocusMaine. And in that regard, let me put you at ease by saying that as I reviewed your background and experience, I found it to be very, very impressive. I think in so many ways, it complements what Kim was able to offer in those very formative years. It's almost like you were professional siblings. I don't think that was the case, but when people hear and see what your experience and how it relates to the issues of FocusMaine going forward, I think it's magical. And I think that the next chapter to the story of FocusMaine is going to be a very strong story of success because of both of you. So hopefully that puts you somewhat at ease, and notwithstanding the fact this is going to be very, very difficult for you. But so let's begin. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a Missouri boy, brought up and known that it's important to show me, because that's what the state is all about, the show me state. But tell us more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. Thanks for your kind remarks. My mother would be surprised to hear with your description of me. So I grew up in small town Missouri. worked at a restaurant, was not engaged in agriculture, but had agriculture surrounding me. Became interested in politics at an early age, and actually met my hometown congressman, whose name is Ike Skelton, a Democrat named Ike Skelton, who is no longer in Congress or with us, but who was a tremendous mentor to me, even at the early age of about 10, when I met him in Washington, D.C., and he took me to the House gallery to watch a vote in progress. So that passion for politics kept with me as I grew up, and I got to know Ike as a college student and went to work for him in Washington, D.C. as an intern. And then he hired me as the person who opened his mail and answered his phone. And I actually was going through some paperwork this morning and found a letter from him inviting me to work for him at the top salary of about $24,000 per year. So I was living and working in DC for very little money, but loving what I did, and stayed with him for 14 years, working my way up to chief policy officer and really focusing on everything. As you know, a congressional office manages 150 different issues at once, and I was managing those matters. But I cut my teeth in agriculture, in innovation, in tax policy issues, small business issues, a lot of the bread and butter stuff that was important to the people back in rural Missouri. Then after Ike, I started working for the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, which is the world's biggest biotech trade group, representing about 1,000 member companies and investors, mostly small companies, but also the large biopharmaceutical, bioagriculture, and biomanufacturing companies. Worked as a lobbyist there, and then led their policy department that was in charge of agriculture, environmental, and food-related work. And then we were fortunate to get a really dynamic new CEO in 2020 who brought me up onto her leadership team as deputy COO. So I was introduced to a lot of the business mechanics part of the association, as well as she asked me to be the chief sustainability officer and really work to develop the first sort of cross-cutting, cross-sectoral sustainability program for the industry. So that was there. And then the pandemic happened, and I really decided, Kevin, my husband, and I decided we were gonna work from Maine if we were gonna work from anywhere, which was the smartest thing we ever did, because Maine runs in my blood. My dad's from Presque Isle, my husband's from Damariscotta, but the pandemic accelerated our long dream of moving to Maine. I quit my job in DC when they asked me to come back full time, and this opportunity came at FocusMaine, and it was a perfect fit. It was all the issues I care about, the sectors I care about, but with a new twist of economic development, which I think is really exciting for me to really take what I've learned in the policy space, in the DC relationship building space, and apply that here, build those friendships and partnerships, and do good.
Yeah, extremely well said. And it builds the case for what I had said at the outset, which was that almost perfect fit that moves us to the next chapter in FocusMaine's life. Because some of the key words you mentioned was sustainability, not to mention the agriculture, not to mention the coalition building that I heard you reference. I mean, there was so many. Innovation was another one. I mean, and when you think of all the businesses that we were involved in and how the times that we're in, how change is so relevant, and change is really innovation, that it speaks volumes to the luck we had in securing a presence, and how in some ways the pandemic served us in that respect. So we appreciate that. How did the How did you become aware of FocusMaine? Was there a happen chance there, or was it more calculated? What brought you together?
Well, I will say that two good friends of mine in Maine connected me with Ed McCursey
Yep.
from ProSearch, and he is on the board of FocusMaine, among other great things that he does for the state. He was kind enough to have lunch with me, talk with me about opportunities here, listen to what I said about what I did and what my passions were, and connected me with Kim and with Toby Aarons, who was there at FocusMaine for a good long period of time, and some of their consultants as well. And it was just a series of friendly lunches, just, you know, professional conversations about what opportunities could look like in the future. I was drawn to the organization immediately because of its focus, no pun intended. But I did, it was through good, kind-hearted connections and conversations that I grew to learn about it. And then I stayed in touch with Toby and with Kim and Ed through the years. The pandemic, this was all pre-pandemic.
Yeah. Well, it was a good happen chance, and we're grateful for it. But you referenced something that's important to Mainers, and that's relationships. That's, you know, I find it to be a part and parcel of Maine strengths. And speaking to that, I've only spoken with you once before today, which was yesterday, and I already like you, because you have roots in Presque Isle, and that's where I came from and spent several years as city manager. So you're good in my book, regardless of your credentials. So
thank you for that. Thank you for that.
So tell us your connection. People would be interested in that, because Missouri is a long ways from Presque Isle, Maine.
It is a long ways from Presque Isle, Maine. I was remembering some very long road trips through the years from Sedalia, Missouri to Presque Isle, Maine. But my dad grew up in Presque Isle. His parents, my grandfather and grandmother, were from the Presque Isle and Caribou region. My grandfather was a mechanic in Presque Isle. My grandmother was a homemaker, odds and end jobs, and worked in the potato fields like everybody else did. Everyone else does. I think that's still a part of the DNA of Aroostook County. But my parents, my mom was from Missouri. For sort of oddly, they met in Washington, D.C. My dad was stationed there at the Marine Barracks at 8th and I after Vietnam. My mom was a young widower with a child, but my dad had a child as well. They fell in love quickly after meeting at a Labor Day picnic and got married in December. And then my mom stole my father and brought him back to Missouri, where we grew up and had a good life. They now live in Virginia. But my husband and I met in DC sort of the same way. I'm from Missouri, he's from Maine. He worked at the time for Senator Collins. I worked for Ike Skelton. We met there, became married, and now he brought me, or I brought him, whatever, back to Maine. So a little bit of a fortuitous alignment there.
Yeah, that was fortuitous. It'd be unfair, and I won't do it, to ask you to render an opinion that has anything to do with going forward in a strategic way, because I know that the success that has brought us to this point certainly will provide the foundation for going forward, but there will be different modifications, and those things need to be worked out between you and the board that exists, because the board is a very engaged, involved board, as you have found out. But at the same time, you were inspired, and you just used, if you didn't use those words, those were clearly words of meaning by the words you did choose in terms of what you saw in FocusMaine, its future. And so let me ask you this. When the signature industries have been designated, and they were designated, as you know, by McKinsey, who looked at global trends, looked at our strengths, looked at market opportunities, and put it all together and said, here are your signature industries that have traded high quality jobs offering their, and interestingly enough, they're, as you've heard in our first interview, or you already know, they're industry sectors that are heritage, that for the most part exist already in our state, but apply differently. Fishing, agriculture, food, biopharma, probably the least in terms of heritage, but nevertheless, a tremendous opportunity. Then you back that up by a very, very positive internship program that's done with partners. Do you see the relevance of those three, and not just three, but the workforce component as well, that provides the workers for those signature industries? Do you see that changing much as you look forward? What's your reaction? What can you offer in terms of what you do see based upon what you know today?
Yeah, so I'll say a couple of things to that. One is, I think any incoming leader has ideas and nuggets of information in her head or his head about where the organization should go. I'm no different. I have ideas as well. I think what I'm participating in now is a listening and learning and earning trust tour with our partners, current partners, potential partners, with our funders, with outside voices who I think have relevant opinion about the organization. And really I'm a sponge at the moment, taking all of that in. And I want to give the strategy a bit of time to evolve with that input and data. And by talking to all of the great leaders on our leadership team, you mentioned their engagement, and that's all positive engagement in my experience so far. So we'll be coming back with more specifics about that. But I do believe very strongly that the sectors that are represented currently at FocusMaine really are at the heart of a lot of the solutions to big problems and challenges that society is managing right now. If you look at climate change, if you look at public health, biomedical healthcare for people, for animals is important. Nutrition is important, as well as environmental health. And I think when I look at what FocusMaine is doing, biopharma, agriculture, aquaculture are there. And I think for me, there's also across the economy, not just in those sectors, there are also like trends that are beginning to underpin all decision-making, investment, and belief systems that are building the modern economy. Those we talked about already a little bit are around sustainability, broadly defined to include climate, health, as well as diversity and inclusion and business responsibility. That issue is front and center in the minds of CEOs and investors, and particularly little company CEOs that are run by 25 and 30-year-old people from MIT and Berkeley, and their investors. So sustainability, science, innovation, I think those are going to be broadly areas that I think we should look at as we look at those sectors and how we transform our engagement with our partners and others.
Well said. As a matter of fact, I can rest my case in terms of how your past, your attitude, your experience really fits so well into the next chapter that builds upon the success of the first 5 years, well, 7 years, 5 years in which Kim was the CEO president, and FocusMaine, I know, is very gratified and pleased that we have somebody of your caliber, your experience, your skill. So let me finish by sharing with our viewers, and I will not ad-lib this because it's extremely well stated, but this is what one of your chairs in a press release said when you were selected and they made the announcement, "We are thrilled to have found a leader of Dana's caliber to continue to advance FocusMaine strategy. His significant experience in building coalitions and strategic partnerships, commitment to transparent leadership, and expert knowledge in our key sectors of biopharmaceuticals, agriculture, and aquaculture align perfectly with FocusMaine strategy." That was Andrea. Mike Dubiak added these words, and it's a sentence out of the effort, or two sentences actually, that Mike placed an accent on what Andrea had already said, but he went on to say, "Dana's knowledge and perspective on the innovation trends driving economic growth within our key sectors is invaluable. This insight will help us support our sectors as we evolve and innovate to remain relevant in their global markets." Amen, brother. That's a very strong statement, and I think you have earned every bit of it. So congratulations. Thanks for being on the show, and the very best of luck.
Thanks a lot. Have me back in the future. Love to talk more.
You can guarantee it. So you take care.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks.
Bye,
Good.
everybody.
As I think about the takeaway for today's program, actually, I'm delighted to be able to have shared this program with you because we learned a lot about an economic initiative labeled FocusMaine and its impact and its importance to our people, their lives, our livelihood. Yeah, it's an outstanding example in many different ways. First of all, we need to know that it was founded by the vision of two of Maine's business leaders. Mike Dubiak, who we mentioned in the interviews, is somebody who was he is a former CEO, president of WEX, and Andrea Chinquette-Maker, who has been involved in a number of initiatives in Maine and more recently has been a partner at Pierce Hatwood. But you think about where we are in just 7 years after its creation, a board of directors have been brought together, established of business leaders, thought leaders from around the state. They have selected two outstanding leaders. You met Kim Hamilton in the first interview, in which she had those very skillfully, her efforts were very skillful, but it was in those first 5 formative years that are so important in the beginning of any organization. She leaves on July 1, and you just heard from Dana O'Brien, who picked up the reins on June the 13th. And as you heard in his interview, seemed almost to be able to step in without losing a beat because of his experiences, because of his skills. And we're very grateful for that, because that leadership makes such a difference, and it'll guide us in the next 7 years, just like the first 7 years have been. But along the way, we have learned some pretty darn important things that have been brought to us by the formation, the existence of FocusMaine. One is that we all know that in every state, economic development is vital to that state's success. But in truth, what makes economic development successful in one state probably can be and probably will be different from another state, but that's not often recognized. Therefore, the magic is in knowing your state, its strengths, and to play to that, to find the global trends, the market opportunities, and to put that in perspective with your strengths. And that's exactly what FocusMaine has done. They've also brought to the table something that Maine has wanted for some time. That's the participation of the private sector. But they've done so not at the loss of the public sector. In fact, they work with the Department of Economic and Community Development. They work with other entities that provide a service or a responsibility to the economy. No, they recognize that it is to supplement, not supplant. It is to coordinate and not be in conflict. It's a team effort, and that's obvious in their work. And speaking of work, they do their work in an unconventional way. And I'm struck by this because so often an organization with their intent, their purpose gets organized and they deliver the service themselves. That's not the case with FocusMaine. They are more like a convener. They go about the task of investing into those businesses that are involved in those signature industries like agriculture, aquaculture, or biopharma, or as we've seen in the recruitment of quality people by way of internships. Very impressive. Yes, they have raised millions of dollars to carry out that function. And that function is not to do the work themselves necessarily, but to create partnerships and to invest in those entities that already exist. A long story short, the results and the success of their first 7 years of existence speaks volumes and speak for itself. And that, I predict, will be the case for the next 7 years and probably be well beyond that as well, because they have discovered the secret sauce. They understand that success is wrapped up in knowing not only the importance of what you do, but the impact and importance of the way you do it. Hats off to FocusMaine, their people, and their purpose. And that is the takeaway for this week. Remember, in a world where you can do anything, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another. Until the next time we get together, which I look forward to doing so, have a wonderful day, week, and time. Take care. Thank you.